Good morning once again, and thank you very much for joining the Center for Data Archiving, Management, Analysis, and Advocacy, C-DAMAA for short, for our first monthly webinar series for the 2024-2025 academic year. This is going to be a regular event on our calendar, and anytime it's time for such an event, we'll send you the invitation link for you to join. Today's session will be looking at research data management. I have Dr. Emmanuel Champo, who is the head of the Data Hub of ISCO. Dr. Emmanuel Champo will take us through data reuse and reproducibility, tools and technologies for data management, institutional and funders' expectations, and then research data management challenges and some case studies.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and hello to those who have been able to join this webinar. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm also grateful to the earlier speakers for setting a good stage for me, because they've addressed a good number of the issues that needs to be addressed on this program. They've talked about data management, what it is, how it is done, and some of the key privacy and ethical concerns that must be considered. They've even discussed some of the data management tools that are needed and how they should be deployed. So I'm very, very grateful to Dr. Sebo and Dr. Kofinti for setting the good stage for us. I've been told to speak on 4 major issues: that is data reuse and reproducibility, the tools and technologies for data management, and institutional funders' expectation. In my view, I think these issues are very related, so I'll combine them together and discuss them under data preparation and reporting standard by addressing each of these 3 issues. And then when I'm done, I'll talk about data management challenges using a specific case studies that we do employ within the University of Cape Coast. So based on that, it means that I've reorganized my presentation to consider 4 major issues that are all related to data reuse and reproducibility. And that is data preparation workflow, data reporting standard, data sharing infrastructure, and then the last one, of course, will be the data management challenges and case studies. And please, as the host has advised, try as much as possible to note down your questions. We can have a good time to discuss this, and I will try as much as possible to make sure that we don't get tired out of our meeting. But please, before I start, allow me to mention that the presentation I'm going to make is born out of a community engagement run within the University of Cape Coast, particularly at the Africa Center of Excellence in Coastal Resilience, ASCORE, and within the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences. And so please allow me to acknowledge that what I'm going to share is not only my knowledge, but it's pieces of knowledge and data set that have been accumulated through collective effort by a number of people within the University of Cape Coast. And I'm particularly grateful to Professor Dennis Aheto, the director of our center, for the push he's been giving us and the resources he's been providing for us to learn on how data management can effectively be done within the academic space. I also want to thank Professor Joseph Agriffin for the support he's been giving us. Most of us double as members of ISCO and as members of DFAS, and a good collaboration and agreement between these 2 heads have been vital in the success we've been able to achieve. I also want to mention that we have a strong team coming from different sections of the university that do work with us in our data management strategies. So on this, my message is that what I'm going to share is not only my knowledge, but it's how we can effectively manage data. And my name, to remind you again, is Emmanuel Champon. My email address is what you see on the screen. I am officially with the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences, and as Dr. Kanta mentioned, I double as the manager for the Data Hub and Ecosystem Information Systems at the Africa Center of Excellence in Coastal Resilience. Allow me to also mention that I have personally appointed myself as an honorary member of the Economics Department, even though I'm sure the head of the department may have issue with it. I'm grateful to be associated with this department and also with the data management section of the department. So thank you very much for the opportunity to join this program. So now allow me to start. And first, let's help ourselves by understanding what data reuse and data reproducibility is. I know that the earlier speakers try to address this, but for my presentation, I want to emphasize what this means and why they are needed. And I want to mention that start with the data reuse. Generally, when we talk about data reuse, we're mainly talking about harnessing data created from other research programs for new purposes. And these purposes may include learning, may include research, teaching, and also for community engagement. And if you look at the recent publications, looking at how people have access and reuse others' data, you'll see that most of the use of the data that has been published or archived on different data portals have been done by students, particularly MPhil, master and PhD students, for learning, and also by scientists to learn new protocols and ways of undertaking research and for unraveling issues surrounding global challenges. So the message here is that it is acceptable and it is actually encouraged to use people's data. And as scientists, as students hoping to understand how nature works, how environment works, and how socioeconomic structures function, we need to be able to openly strive to publish our data. And here I want to disagree a bit with the earlier presenter that his master's dissertation is still not published. I will encourage him to publish that, and I will show him how he can benefit by doing so as we go along in our presentation. And in support of the argument that data reuse is acceptable and encouraged, you will see that in earlier times when data sharing was not mandated by different institutions or was not a mainstream event, people didn't used to take and analyze people's data for their research publications. But in recent years, there has been a massive explosion in publications that are actually based on data set published by others. And these are good. These are very good. And it helps us to generate integrity around our research programs, develop society benefits that can benefit, that can encourage the development of our different communities and ensure fairness when it comes to accreditation and distribution of research benefits. So because of that, the earlier speakers mentioned that when it comes to data, open access data publication, or efforts to publish your data or to make it available to others to use, many journal outlets now demand that before your work is even accepted for review and publication, you have to demonstrate that you've already archived your data in an open access data portal and submit the proof before they accept your work for publication. And many institutions that actually give money for research actually require that the outcome of the research must be deposited in an open access repository. And the US demands this since as far back as 2013, there have been government policy demanding that data outcomes from all research programs, at least those that are funded by the US government, must be made publicly available for the good of the general public. The European Union also demands that through its Data Act that was published recently in 2013, 2023, they also demand that publications must be made openly accessible. And African Union Data Policy Framework also encourages open access publication of raw research data. So here I'm not talking about analyzed scientific reports. I'm talking about the raw outcome of the research. These are different government authorities demanding that when they support your research programs, you must show evidence that the outcome of that research had been deposited in an open access repository where everybody interested can access and use that data. Well, hopefully, when we have the break and the open forum discussion, we can talk about the open access data policy of UCC. I do not know whether UCC has an open access data policy. I know UCC has data policy touching on specific issues, but as to whether the university itself emphasizes that the research outcomes done by members of this university must be published in an open access repository, I'm not aware of that, and I'll be grateful for a discussion on this. So that then let's look at data reproducibility. What does it mean, and why do we need it? Well, when we talk about data reproducibility, we're talking about efforts to make it easier for others to repeat the outcome of our previous research outcomes. And this means that the results we obtain from our research should be obtainable by others using their own data and their own methods. If you claim that you found that 1 + 1 is equal to 2 as part of your research, then somebody, an independent entity, a researcher, should be able to arrive at the same conclusion by using their own data and method. And that is what data reproducibility means. It also means that people can adopt your data and method and arrive at the conclusion you achieved when you did your report. So that is what data reproducibility means. And the reason why we need it is that there wouldn't be any development in our society, and particularly in science, when we are not able to reproduce the outcome of research result. This is vital because how we act in our societies, in our governments, in our universities, in our communities, depends on the understanding generated through our different research programs. And before we can confidently run out and implement any policy decision, we want to make sure that those policy decisions are based on sound data. So we cannot just take results from one research program and run with it. We have to ensure that that research program is repeatable and that is verifiable and it works before we can run with it. That means that when you do your research and you have data, you should strive to make that data openly available so that you can support the development of knowledge around the world and particularly in our communities. So then the question arises, how can we achieve this? How can we achieve data reuse and data reproducibility? Well, I'm going to share 3 pieces of advice and elaborate on these pieces of advice later. The first advice I will share is that we should strive to use smart data preparation method. And I think the earlier presenters talked about how you can prepare your data, label the data properly, assign the necessary identifiers and metadata set to be able to ensure that your data is properly prepared. The second advice is that follow data reporting standard. And the third is to work with open and trusted data sharing portals. Okay, and I will throw a bit more light on each of these quickly. So on the first one, on smart data preparation, the emphasis, as the earlier speaker pointed out, should be prepare a data that will be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. I don't need to explain these terms. The earlier speakers did a good job on explaining them. So that's what we should strive at. And what I'm going to share regarding data preparation is based on experiences that we've obtained through our ESCOR Center and also through other data portals managed by international data repositories. And my particular favorite is the data center managed by the Cornell University of United States of America. And I will encourage you later to visit this, particularly the data site of the African Union of ASCORE, so that you can appreciate how data preparation and data reporting is done. But the advices are, one, that use file formats that are common and open, which means that you don't have to encrypt the data and make it impossible for people to access. I think I will elaborate a bit more on this. And make sure that the file names you use in preparing your data are not ambiguous. The next is make sure that your data is organized logically, and for example, by samples, by treatment method, and so on, so that people can easily find their way through your data. And please do not compress your data, especially when you have to use a proprietary software to compress your data, because people may not have access to that software to be able to decompress your data and have access to it. So make sure that your data is easily accessible, and do not embed any files, programs, or spreads. That will make it people to easily use your data. And related to that, please do not password protect your data. I'm not talking about data that is not yet published or deposited in an open access data portal. Okay, for one that you are still working on, that one, as the earlier speaker mentioned, you need to make sure that it is safe and protected. But if you are going to transport that data into a repository for the general public to use, then the encryption and password protection are not necessary. So allow me to throw a bit more light on the file formats that are useful, especially when we need to ensure that our data are prepared smart. You know, we have different types of data. So I'm going to quickly run through the different types of data and highlight the file formats that are most appropriate for each type of data. So starting with text, if the data is text, then to ensure that your data can survive for a long period of time, you have to ensure that at least you use a plain text formatting. And here, the USA ASCII or the UFT8 will be one of the most appropriate way to format the data. When it's a raster image, then the TIFF uncompressed or JPEG 2000 is the most appropriate I will recommend. If it is a vector graphic data type, then the SVG approach will be the most appropriate I will recommend. Of course, there are other strategies, and I added this strategy because I know we'll have to share our slide data with the students, particularly among us. So I added the medium and the low term preservation strategy so that you are aware which strategy to use when formatting your data for archiving. If it's an audio data, then the AIFF approach will be the best, or the WAVE approach will be the most appropriate format to use. If it's video, then motion JPEG 2000 will be the best, or the RV. And here, please, again, it shouldn't be compressed. If it's a spreadsheet, then the comma separated value formatting will be the best approach. And in some instances, you may use the SQL data definition language to do this. If it's a virtual reality data, then the S3D will be the most appropriate data format to use. And if it's a computer program, then make sure, please, you archive it to make it easier for people to access without having to run it through a compiler. And I want to believe that those who have been doing computer programming are aware of this. So here, you can decide to make it accessible through the different language platforms, either through Java, Python, or the C+ platform. And if it is a presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation, the open access may be the most appropriate to use, or the PowerPoint, at least starting from the 2007 version and the current ones, will be the most appropriate to use. So that is on the smart data preparation. Now, when it comes to the data reporting standard, as efforts to ensure data reuse and reproducibility, there are important checklists that we must consider. And the earlier speakers mentioned some of these checklists. So what I'm going to provide should add to this checklist. And the first is that you have to make sure that the data that is reported has the important bibliographic information, such as the name of the authors, the title of the data, and other related publications. It may happen that the raw data you are publishing had already been analyzed and published elsewhere in a journal outlet or in a book. You have to let people accessing the data know that that information has already been vetted by a qualified expert and it has been published already. And another checklist that must be considered is what we call the machine readable standard. And here it relates to the online identities that often comes with data set. So we should be able to have the online identity of the data authors, as well as the international standard organization standard that were used in reporting the data. And if, for example, you have to use some taxonomic nomenclature to describe your data, then you have to make sure that such nomenclature are standard and conform with international protocols. And another issue that we have to always include in your data reporting criteria will be the license that comes with your data. And this often deals with data that are yet to be published scientifically, or data that has some business interests. You want to make sure that you allow people to know the terms of use of the data so that people don't get conflicted when it comes to the use of your data. And then the last point I want to share and throw a bit more light on the metadata standard. This is very, very, very important. And the earlier speakers mentioned them. And I'm going to speak briefly on this standard. And here I have a personal problem with it, because currently, if you look at the standard for reporting data, especially for producing the descriptors of the data that will allow people to easily find data, place the data in the proper context, and also reuse the data. These are done differently by different disciplines and different data centers, and often people who do fund research programs have different data, metadata standard requirements. And this is a challenge. So if you go search around for different metadata standard, the one that I would say is a bit multidisciplinary and tries to allow different data sets generated by different work programs to be able to use it are the Dublin Core metadata standard. You can Google this to be able to access the standard specifically. And in social science and economic sciences, we have the Data Documentation Initiative that also describes the metadata standard that are appropriate for research outcomes generated through social sciences and economics. And those of us in ecology, there is what we call the ecological metadata language that also specifies the standards that can be used. And in geospatial data analysis, particularly as used by geographers, there is the ISO standard 19115. This is a standard that was developed or built upon the US Federal Geographic Data Committee's standard. And this is also used in geography. And then in genomics and gene technology, they also have their own standards, and even in astronomy. So I'm giving these examples to highlight that when it comes to data reporting standard, different disciplines are doing their own thing in their own corners. And later I will highlight to you that this is not actually very good when it comes to the interoperable research that was mentioned by earlier speakers, and also the need for us to address challenges that are confronting our global communities. So for the benefit of our students, if you want to know the metadata standard that are appropriate for the work programs you are targeting as part of your research, please, you can visit the this website, rdamsc.bat.ac.uk, to search for the different data standard used by different disciplines, including those in economics, social sciences, and biology. So now the third issue I want to address is the use of trusted data sharing infrastructure. And here, I don't have any slide on this, but what I want to say is that there are a lot of portals that are reporting data or that are claiming to make data available to the general community. And you want to ensure that where you dump your data is one that is trusted, verified, and by the international community, so that your information can accumulate the proper accreditation that it needed and can not be corrupted by other users. And in that context, I'm going to switch to the data management challenges and share examples on how this open access trusted data management infrastructure can be used. And here, I'm going to discuss this using three major challenges. And the first one is what I hinted you earlier, that currently, if you look at how data is managed across the world, it is done sectorally. So different disciplines are doing their own data management activities. Another issue will be the private sector interest. And the third issue I'm going to discuss is lack of institutional recognition and policy. And I'll discuss this using examples we have learned through our Africa Center of Excellence program. So now let's look at sectorial data management. Now, as I said, all research disciplines are per definition specialized, which is good, because we need to have the expert knowledge to understand at the cellular level how organisms are impacted by events happening at the microscopic level. So it is good that we have different disciplines dedicated to different work programs. Okay. This is good. The challenge is that now the issues confronting the development of our global space, and particularly in Africa and in Ghana, are coming from different sources. So we have climate change as one issue. We have pollution as another issue. Recently, you heard about the small-scale mining issue that UTAC is even called a strike on. And then we have diseases that are impacted by climate change and the pollution event. We're losing our habitat to deforestation and the destruction of our coastal marine space. And then we have other organisms that are coming. And these different factors, they do interact. So clearly, the picture here is that if you are managing data by looking at it from a sectorial angle, you may miss the bigger picture. You may miss the bigger picture. And so our effort to translate research outcomes into practical ideas for supporting sustainable development goals of the UN are not being met. They are being hampered because of the sectorial nature of our data management strategies. And what the UN is encouraging is that it's the environment that ensures economic development and that also supports social progress. So within the Africa Center of Excellence program, we think that any data management strategy should be able to protect the marine space because we work in the ocean coastal environment. And it should also protect the freshwater systems that flow into our ocean space. And when we do that, then we will have a healthy environment that can support our coastal communities and our coastal development. We also believe that the data reporting program should be done in a way that can support the sustainable use of our coastal marine space. And we think that any data management program that achieves this can support sustainable development goals of the United Nations. This is the perspective the Africa Center of Excellence within the University of Cape Coast has brought to data management structure. So if you go to our data portal, you will have an effort, an attempt that tries to bring different set of information from different disciplines into one single spot to support interoperable research and new discoveries on our coastal marine systems. And this is an effort to cut through the current standard where data management is done on sectoral basis. So we think that the biology that supports our coastal communities, we should have information on this biology. And we should also have data sets that speaks to the physical environment that supports the biology, as well as the socio-economic drivers that pushes the exploitation of the biology. This is our perspective, and we think that this is new, particularly in Ghana and Africa. We are not aware of any data portal that is this multidisciplinary, and we will be grateful to learn if you can point to us any efforts within Africa and Ghana that achieves this goal. So this is how we within Africa Center of Excellence are striving to address the sectorial data management structures that are currently limiting the development of knowledge in support of the SDGs the UN is pushing. Now, the next issue I want to address is the private sector interest. And this, I'm mainly talking about private companies, for example, the oil companies that are operating in our marine space, private consultants, NGOs, and civil society organizations, and others. You know that these people actually do also run research programs, and they have a good amount of data that can inform development actions in our communities. The challenge here is that for these private entities, data equals trade secret. Okay, and it also is something that can be monetized. So they do everything in their power to protect this data set and keep it secret. And as a result, a huge amount of information that actually we need to analyze to be able to fully understand how our communities function, or to fully appreciate what makes our communities develop, are held by private entities. And we are not able to analyze this and make it available for our government to use. So then the question is, how is ACE-Corps addressing this data management challenge? Well, our strategy, we call it data philanthropy. And what we've done is that within our data portal, we've built a special portal that is dedicated to private organizations, projects, and businesses. And we have strategies that allows us to engage these private entities, reach an agreement with them, and that allows us to create a dedicated portal to individual private entities to be able to publish their data on our data portal. And here, I want to invite members of the university, different departments, research programs that are interested in archiving their marine and coastal research data set to contact us, and we can have their portal, a unique portal dedicated to them on our data management portal. Now, the third issue I want to talk about is lack of institutional recognition and policy. And probably this may be of interest to our senior scientists among us. The current practice is that because the world community is in a hurry to make raw data set available, most of the data portals do not have rigorous data review in place. And so they are not also indexed, which means that if you publish currently your data on an open access data portal, it will be difficult for you to get your university to accept this as part of your work assessment. I know in other universities, particularly in Europe and North America, the effort to stop this and encourage or include data publication as part of their work assessment programs. So because of this, many universities do not have policies, and where they have policies, they do not encourage scientists to publish their data in open access repositories, because they have no benefit to gain by doing so. And for us at ASCOR, we think that we can do small things to help address this. So what we've done is that we've instituted a multidisciplinary data editors and reviewers that ensure that any data set that is submitted to a data portal is not automatically published. It will have to go through a rigorous review program to ensure that the data was correctly generated and speaks to the issues that the data author is claiming in the data report before that data is passed for publication. The next thing we do is that any data set that we accept for publication gets its own digital object identifier, the DOI that the earlier presenter speaks to. And we think that the combination of this, the university and to other authorities, that we have a system in place that ensures open access publication of data, raw data sets, and that is also rigorous and satisfies all scientific data review standard. So this is how we are approaching this institutional recognition challenge within the African Center of Excellence program. So this is where I want to end my presentation. I'll be grateful for your questions and advice on how we can improve on our efforts. I want to thank you very much. And again, I wish to invite you to visit our data hub on the UCC server. You can visit this at the rawdatahub.ucc.edu.gh. Thank you very much for your attention and for listening.